orphanage. I was about 15, I guess. Now, Orville was a Mexican kid, and Max, God knows what he was. He was a tall, thinny-skinned kid with really, really big hands and real long arms, and a total deadly street fighter. He would slap. If anybody's messed with him, he'd just start slapping at him, and the next thing they'd go over. He was bad news. And Orville was, he'd whip a knife out on you and stab you with it. Kind of a... These two guys became convinced that I could take them, because I had read, with the help of another friend, a little book called The Gentle Art of Self-Defense. And so between us, we had practiced all these little holds and trips and throws and come-along grips and various ways to hurt or immobilize people. They were all written in this little gentlemanly thing. The idea was you weren't supposed to get up any kind of a sweat. No matter who came at you, you were not supposed to use a hell of a lot of force. You just used their force against them, and you stepped out of the way and you tripped them up somehow. And so I studied this, and then when I met Max and Orville, I would explain to them how these things work. I would show them these holds, and I would always be just a little rougher than I needed to be, just to let them know that when you are in this hold, you are helpless, and the guy can snap your wrist in a minute, and you can't hit him with that hand if you try. Hit me. No, you're not going to. Bam, you got total control. Literally one-handed grip on a person, you can really tie them down because of the fact that the bones don't like in one way, but in another way. They can be hurt, and there are places where you can press on yourself, and pain will just go right through you because you found a pressure point, see? Well, I learned all about that when I was a little boy, and I passed it on to others as more, like, have a sense of proficiency at it, because hands-on gets you to finally to a feeling where the feeling I have is I feel like one of those cardboard boxes that you can kick it around a backyard. Give it a kick. Kick it again. When you're through with that, you look at it, and it's got a couple of crushed corners and maybe a dented in on one side, but it's still a damn cardboard box. See? Well, that's sort of me. If I can get my hands on somebody, I can pretty much keep them from hurting me, and they can't make me let go once I get hold of it. I mean, not easy. And I would convince guys like Max and Orville that I could do that, so that then they would become my allies, and everybody would see that Max will kick your head off, Orville will hurt you, and they're all treat George as though he had some special thing, mainly storytelling, my ability to be entertaining when we go out in a car, buy some beers. George would start cracking jokes, start telling rhymes, telling poems. When I met Lola for the first time, the first thing I did when I got in the damn car with her was tell her a poem, a parody of a poem that had wit in it. And so that was part of my ability to be charming, was just to tell tales. And so little wonder that I would carry it over.
You validated yourself through being a literate person. You found this an area of security. Now, to be or pleasure?
No,
is it pleasure?
Not even security. You're right on the level, the edge of it. See?
You said you started writing or earn your money at 23. Now, from 14 to 23, what did you do in those years?
Everything that writers do. I have hitchhiked back and forth across this country as a vagabond at least 9 times. I have been to L.A. 3 or 4 times before I finally stuck. It drove me out a few times. I never ever really went into the big city, New York, for very long, because I didn't want to die on the pavement there. In the country, you can always find some grass behind a billboard to sleep on. You can get away from the law. You can get out to the edge of town if necessary, and you can do without food. I went 11 days once without any food voluntarily, just to find out what would be the results of that, and I had nothing negative to say about it. Being hungry is no problem. You can always find sleep. I would sleep in bus depots. I would nod off in all-night cafes. I would try to be charming. I would try to be a people pleaser. My very first job after I got out of that orphanage, at the age of 15 when I left home, was as a shoe shine boy. And I can do things with pound brush in your hand to be able to do this sort of stuff endlessly and have the muscles and all that goes with that, so that when I do get a hold of something, I can get a grip on it, see, because of all of this activity as a child, things that I did. And my charm there came from, my ability, I guess the magic, there's got to be some word for it, but I could get somebody into the shoe shine parlor. There was a mirror for them to look at. I could give them punch boards. I could turn on the radio to suit them. I could hand them a newspaper. I could play servant. I could admire their shoes. I know good leather when I see it. I know how to tell them that. I know how to make a person feel like $1,000,000 if I can handle his feet for a few moments. Because, you know, my God, that's a beautiful pair of shoes, you know, and everybody takes the compliment to themselves if you admire the clothing. And so as a kid, I could, for every 15-cent shoe shine, I could get a quarter tip. Or at least the quarter and the dime tip off of the 15-cent shine. So that I was I got to a point very quickly where I had a $10 bill in my pocket and all of the time. And I had bought a new wool suit, and my employer had sold me a pair of cowboy boots that were beautiful. And I've almost always gone for really good leather when I want to be on. Give me shoes, because I learned about those very early. Earning my living shining shoes for $5 a week was my pay, and my motel room cost $6. So with the $5 plus $1 worth of tips, I could get the room rent paid, and then $2.50 would buy me a meal ticket once a day at this restaurant, and then whatever tips I could pick up, I could buy a Coke or a hamburger or a hot dog or whatever would be available, and I would live from day to day, and once a week I would, or once a month I guess it would be, I would send out the cleaning to a cleaners that also had a shoe shine boy who was my competitor in town. You go to the cleaners, get your shoe shine, go to the hotel, get your shoe shine.
Did you start accumulating library books, or did you hang out in the library?
I never accumulated any books. I hung out in libraries in every town I went to. In fact, I spent most of the time when I was in New Orleans sleeping in a little park next to the library. And I would stay out of sight till the sun would come up and they'd open the damn library, and then I would go in the library, and I'd spend most of the day in there. And then I'd walk up to the Voquerie, which wasn't very far from there, and try and figure some way to hustle myself some money, and I hardly ever would get any kind of a job, although one guy offered me to mow his mother's lawn. She lived out in Jefferson Parish. He took me out there, sat around in his car for 2 hours while I mowed the lawn, and they gave me 50 cents, and I was back in. Anyway, yes, inside the library, and not only that, but see, there's something that you have to know about me if you really are to understand me. I saw in Charles Beaumont a brother.
Why?
Because there was a quality about the man, and I think you see it in Ray Bradbury too. He's not a man's man, not one of those guys that gets out and wrestles around with the other guys to show how all that horseplay, that rough stuff, let's talk dirty, let's be mean, let's show each other how manly we all are. No, there's too much of the gentleman, too much of the retired, too much of the ask permission first, too much of the verbal, too much of the ornate, you know, a little bit of, you can ask some people, what time is it? Somebody might tell you. Charles would say, well, not knowing, I cannot state with any degree of accuracy. And you'd say, what? I didn't ask for that, you know. He would go into a verbalization that would finally achieve the mark, and they would have a little wit in it somewhere. You know, the hounds of spring are fast on winter's traces, but let it pass.
And he said of you that, ask George what time it is, and he'll tell you how to build the watch.
Beautiful.
And it's true, it's true. But anyway, I watched Beaumont, and I said,
did you get that?
yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Beaumont said, I mean, when I saw Beaumont, I said, that's the kind of a guy I am. I could use what he knows, what he uses, I could do it. Because his level is on my level. He's not really an outgoing guy. I've learned to be more through the years, but mostly I tend to play Mr. Modesty, and I don't ask for things, you know. If it doesn't find its way to me, I don't need it, because I hate being told no. If I don't believe that I'm going to get something, or that it'll be available, I rarely even show an interest.